Well, well, well. The 2014 Halloween season is wrapping itself up. We're almost at the end of all of the festivities. Halloween is this coming Friday, only a few days away. All of the big-name haunts have been explored by yours truly. But there was one thing that was left unattended to. Before the final verdict can be given, we must discuss an additional offering presented by Final Fear. The controversial, age-restricted, additional, much-talked-about haunt, an experience called stripped identity. Gotta be 18 and older to do this. $6 gets you forcibly in the door. Stripped identity asks you a question. Do you know who you truly are? That doesn't matter though. Once you enter these doors of stripped identity, who you are will be locked away for the term that you serve in this house of insanity. You will be given a new name, and all of the horrors and traumatizations that occur therein that come with that name. Question is, can you make it out with who you are and your sanity intact? Or will you lose yourself in insanity and depravity? I've been wanting to do stripped identity for 3 years now, ever since it was introduced 3 years ago. It started off being a 16 and older haunt, but they soon realized a few weeks in that it had to be moved up to 18 and older. Well, I'm 18 this year. I can drive, and I was able to get my sweet ass out there to do it. Now, as you all know, last week I went to Final Fear, and they completely blew me away. But I didn't get to do stripped identity. So I made the trek back out to Orchard Park today, exclusively to experience stripped identity. Was it worth my time? Was it worth that drive and the money I paid? You bet your fucking ass it was. Stripped identity is different than any other haunt that you're typically used to. As such, it's something that is aimed more at those who are tired of the typical boo jump scares. Even if you love the immersion and settings of typical haunted houses, no matter what, they all sort of leave something to be desired. That scare factor just isn't there. Sure, it's fantastic, and you enjoy yourself and have a fun time, but yet, for seasoned people, these houses just don't scare, you know? They're fun, it's great to possibly jump a little bit and see everything else and be immersed, but it's hard to scare some of us. It's hard to really create a new experience. Now, while Final Fear does create a fantastic experience with the houses that it offers, stripped identity is their attempt to step up and above what everyone else in Buffalo does by offering a visceral and organic experience unlike any other. I participated in the insanity that is stripped identity tonight, and I will never forget what happened. And I will definitely be coming back in following years to experience it. I was recognized almost right away by several people for my last review that I did of the entire haunt. They're like, oh, you're the guy who did that review, and you were eating those cheese fries, weren't you? Well, yeah, that was me. Sorry if I made anyone hungry. I made my way there to stripped identity, watching the disturbingly strange videos playing outside of the haunt. The creepy characters waiting outside for us. I was a part of the brave few that lined up to participate. Watched as the middle schoolers all attempted to be cool by talking to the people outside and giving them a hard time. You know, real mature guys. Handed over my ticket, and I was read a laundry list of things I would be subjected to. Things including but not limited to terror, anxiety, claustrophobia, water, being chained up and bound, being told to eat things, harassment, within reason, of course, being touched, being bound. I've already mentioned that. And all sorts of mental and physical terror, humiliation. There was a 6-page waiver behind that, but well, I was already there. I wasn't prepared to read that. In this haunt, it's an experience where they can touch you, and you just have to listen to what they tell you to do. Now, throughout the rest of this video, I'm going to go into detail of what I experienced. For those of you who are planning to go to Stripped Identity and want to know what it's all about, well, I recommend you don't listen, because I am going to discuss some of the things that I saw therein. I highly recommend that you ought to be surprised when you go. Now, for those of you watching who are from Final Fear, then you already know what it's like, and you're just sticking around to hear my opinions of stuff. Cool. And for those of you who just live in another completely different part of the United States or the world and will never be able to experience this, you can stick around. But if you haven't and are interested, I'll let you off here by telling you that you need to experience Stripped Identity if you can. It was something completely unlike what I've ever experienced. It was beyond imagination, and it was fantastic. Now, for those of you who are still here, let's get into it. I had to sign over my name in print and then signature. I had to sign over who I was, and then I gave them permission to subject me to these things. After doing so, we had to wait for everyone to reset and get ready for us. That was my chair. Before I could think, some messed up looking crazy individual, a female, came out of the house with a bag in her hand and said, "Get in here." And next thing I knew, the bag was put over my head and I was being led blindly by the hands into this house. I couldn't figure out where the hell I was going, and I could hear nothing but screaming and yelling around me and some faint music perhaps. But I heard suffering. I was blind at this point, and I was merely just walking as I was being effectively dragged along. Sat down. Once I sat there, I was alone for about 10 seconds. Didn't know what was going on, completely blind. Till the next thing I knew, well, we'll just call her Mama, because that's what I had to call her in there, until Mama came in, started screaming some strange things. It was hard to hear all of it through the bag, but I was grabbed. My bag was pressed against my face and crinkled around. And I was being yelled at. I was asked what my name was, and of course I said it was Mike. Not anymore. Not inside of Stripped Identity. I was given a new name, a name that would herald the tortures that were to come. My name was the very dignified and very classy Swamp Ass. And that was to be my name throughout the rest of the haunt. When I was asked what my name was, that was my name. And of course you know that part of the fun is being taunted about your name. I can't count how many times I heard myself being made fun of in many ways because of that name. Mocked and humiliated, insults galore about this name. That's all I was called. That set the tone. I had the bag taken off my head after a little bit of harassment, being pushed around a little bit and touched. Mama was holding a map, a world map. Said, "India, 5 seconds, go!" And of course I couldn't make sense because she was moving it around and I had no idea. And I tried to point to it, and well, because I wasn't expecting it and I was disoriented, I ended up pointing at Korea. Well, I was told what a dumb shit I was for that. I was given a piece of chalk and told to go on this wall here and write, "I am pathetic." And while I was saying it, I had to scream it loud. Just as I had to scream loud my name prior to that. When I was told I was Swamp Ass, I had to scream it at the top of my lungs that that was my name. And as I wrote "I am pathetic" on the wall, well, I had to scream it just as much. And at that point I could see, but after a while, Mama got sick of it. And she put the bag back on my head and told me to keep writing. Well, I did. And after a little while more telling myself I was pathetic, the bag was taken off my head and I saw, of course, the "I am pathetic" looked like absolute shit on the wall. And she, more verbal harassment, telling me I failed geography, failed English, I couldn't do a single damn thing right. And then she told me to go and crawl. And there was a little area I had to crawl through. It was down low. I had to crawl and make my way through there to a interesting fellow. Male, female, well, I couldn't really tell. Well, I had to go and see him. And I had to then dress myself up in a little better of attire. Swamp Ass is a female, and I had to dress as such. Over what I was wearing, I had to be fabulous. I had to put on first some underwear over what I was wearing, I had to try and fit into that, and then I had to put on a dress. Well, gotta be fabulous, right? After much trying to put this on, and of course all the while being inundated with this mental, psychological breakdown of just losing who I was inside of this house. After I was fully womaned up, I then had my hands, they told me to put the bag back on my head. They told me to put my hands in a prayer position. After that, tied a rope around it nice and tight. And I was led again blindly into another room and sat down. And I was told that, well, I was to meet my new girlfriend. My new boyfriend, excuse me, my new boyfriend. Now this was someone else who I was waiting in line with for the house. So I wasn't completely unfamiliar with them. It was a female. I don't know her name, but I told her to check my channel out, and so she may be watching right now. Hi. I had to hold hands with her. And all the while, we were being screamed at and everything else, and we were told to talk to each other, make small talk. All the while we were being whipped with, you know, the military sort of hand whip with the foo-foo thing on the end, being, you know, whipped back and forth about this, and we still had to keep talking to each other. Just talk, small talk. We talked about the weather, the experience, the economy. We talked about everything we could for a few minutes. All the while, all this insanity and screaming going on around us. I was then told to stand up, and I was led to the other end of the room and sat down. Bag taken off my head, and they told me, watch this. And on the screen there was a video of a man at the top of a structure on fire. Perhaps a magician who was attempting to do a stunt but failed. Clearly burning to death. And he jumped off and plummeted to his death in the water below. It was a fall too high for anyone to survive. And they looked at me and they're like, you like that? Does that turn you on? Of course I went with it and I said, absolutely. Of course I was told I was disgusting. Swamp ass. Could smell me across the haunt. Sat back down again, pinned against the wall, more shoved around, crushing the bag against my head, hand in hand back again with my boyfriend. Then a classic 50s song came on, and I was told to get up and dance. The bags were taken off our head, and with our hands bound, hand in hand, we had to dance for a few minutes long. The song stopped a little ways, but that didn't mean we had to stop dancing. So we kept at it, dancing back and forth, whatever we could, so that our masters would be pleased. After that, I was taken again into another room. This time I didn't have the bag on my head, but Mama did have it with her. There was a bed in there and a couple other things. There were big, what's the material? Plastic lips against the wall, amongst many other strange devices they could have implemented on me. And I was told to kiss these lips because it was the only thing I'd ever get because of the disgusting creature I was. And I had to passionately make out with it up against the wall, these big-ass, like Rolling Stone style lips minus the tongue. And I just had to go at it. All the while, more insults. After that, I had to turn around, and this is where I learned where Mama told me, in this house, I am not ma'am. You call me Mama. When I give you an order, you tell me thank you, Mama. Of course, can't argue. So I did. And keep in mind, all the while, my hands were bound. And she had her bag. Well, the bag I was wearing. She had it, and she started going around, and she told me to crawl, hands and knees. I had to crawl. And I had to go and get my bag. And she led me around the table in the room, circle around, and I had to go and get it from her. And all the while she's taunting me, come on, get your shit bag, swamp ass, come on, come get it like you dog you are. I'm trying going at it, more taunting, going at it. And, you know, all the while she's saying, growl, bark like a dog, bark. And after everything, I had to bark and say, thank you, Mama. After a while, eventually, she let up and gave it back to me, put it back on my head. She said, hold on to this is your life, don't let it go. Came to the next room, and I was taken off me and given to someone else across the room, another one of my torturers. This room had chains hanging from the ceiling, and of course all manner of torture. The walls were done up with blood and newspaper clippings. You could hear screaming across the room. And I was told that I had to crawl across the room to the guy who had the bag. Partway through my crawl, I was told I had to military crawl. Down on my elbows, working my way there. After I went and got, I had to bring it back, put it back on my head. Oh, and by the way, what I was saying, back in the room where I had to crawl to get my bag, and she was leaving me on the table, my bounds, where I was bound up, did come undone. And of course, after a while, I said, hey, this came undone. So she's like, oh, I'll tie you up extra tight. And she literally, Mama tied me up real tight, like. So I wasn't about to go through this without being bound up. So then after I went back and forth, got the bag, I was told to stand, bag back over my head. I was pinned up against a wall. And I was chained there. I heard them rustling chains around, felt them around my feet. My legs were shackled to the wall, up on my chest. I was up against the wall, chained there. More taunting ensued, more being whipped around, beat around a little bit. And then I was told that I was going to meet a friend, an interesting fellow. And the bag was taken off my head right before something was put into my hands. Something gross. Something felt squishy. The bag was taken off my head and I saw a fellow in a gas mask staring at me, placing something into my hands, and I looked. And he said, don't drop it. This is your life. And it was a worm. Yeah. A real, live, squirming worm covered in dirt. Taunting back and forth, and I was told to eat this worm. Ladies and gentlemen, you might have heard from people who went through stripped identity where they said they had to do such a thing, where they had to eat a bug. I heard that. I was assuming it would be something like, it would be a gummy worm or a candy or something made to look real. Final Fear doesn't play games. It was a real, live, squirming in the dirt worm. I made sure of that. And I was told to eat it. I'm not sure. Most people might refuse. Not sure if you could refuse. I didn't want to find out. I ate it. It was absolutely disgusting and horrifying. All the while, again, once I put it in my mouth and I was eating it, this disgusting taste in my mouth, and I was being told all these, again, degrading, humiliating things to put me into this experience. I was trying to chew on it. It was disgusting texture. It tasted awful. One of the worst things I've ever tasted. It was disgusting, and since I came right home and filmed this review, I still feel its guts and the dirt inside of my mouth right now. And I was being told I had to eat it and swallow. I thought I was gonna throw up, but I just had to do it, and I did. And after that, they're like, well, that was supposed to be your friend. You ain't your only friend. You know, going at back and forth. I was unchained and led into another room by the gas mask man and forced to look to see. Yes, these were worms, where they came from. I verified it before I ate it. That was a real honest-to-goodness worm. There was no trickery involved. It tasted like one and looked like one. It was a worm, and I was shown exactly where they came from in the next room over. Told to smell them to know. I only picked another one out and gave it to me. Now, at this point, I had had my bag taken from me, but my hands were still bound. I was told to grab this worm and hold on to it. I was going to meet another friend, and that friend may also have me eat this worm. I was then shoved into the two large inflatable things, the cushions that you go through like in Fright World for the ending with claustrophobia. I came through there, and the fellow who greeted me asked me where my bag was. I said, well, I had taken it away, and he pushed me back out, and he's like, go get it! Go get one! So I went back to Gas Mask Man, and I said, hey, I told me I need a bag. So he did put me back in the bag, and I went through again. He greeted me, and I was holding this worm tight in my hands. He said, all right, we're going to meet a friend. And I'm being led into his domain, of course, being asked what my name was. What I was, not who. He says, all right, here you met some friends. Well, we're going to meet another one. Say hello, takes my bag off, bend down a little bit, to Grandma. And inside of a casket was a decaying skeletal corpse of a grandmother. And all around me I could hear the sounds of people screaming, yet still. And I was told by this large, very intimidating looking man to pray to the Lord Satan over her. He asked me if I knew any satanic prayers. I said, well, not by heart. And he says, well, I'm not going to give you one. Figure it out. So I did. Thank you to Behemoth and Ghost for giving me some lyrics to turn into prayers, you know. Hail Satan, Archangel. Hail Satan, welcome your zero. Paraspera ad inferi, infestasasumum. All things in Latin. I invoked Satan to take grandmother into the realm of darkness, to sit beside him on the frozen throne of darkness, of evil, so that the sin of hell may rise to the earth and conquer all that is light. Satan with grandma at her side. Hail Satan, you know, onward, Ave Satanas. You know, I went on it for 2 minutes. I stopped at one point. He's like, keep going. So I kept at Latin verses and invocations all on demons. He was impressed. He told me, good, good. Kept the bag off my head and I was unbound. I was led into a room by another fellow. Think of the Mad Hatter from Alice, crossed with the Cheshire Cat, mixed with evil. Well, that was this guy, all in black, rhyming things. Now, if you've ever seen the original Saw movie, you'll know that there was a scene in there where Adam had to search through a toilet to find additional pieces to help them in their game. Now, in the end, of course, it was in the back of the toilet in the tank. But he did have to search through this grimy, gross, disgusting toilet at first because he thought it might have been in there. Well, this was that scene times about 10. I was in a room with toilets filled with all manner of nasty things, all with whatever they used to create the urine, and some toilets had whatever they used for puke, for shit, hypodermic needles, and all manner of gross things. And I was told I would be allowed to go if I could sift through them and find the key. I chose not to pontificate on how gross this would be and just went for it because I'd survived Mama's tortures and everything else thus far. So I just went for it. I found it in 2 tries. The first toilet had needles in it. Now granted, it didn't actually have the needles in it, but it had the hypodermic containers that would normally hold the needles minus the needles. I just said that to make it interesting. It was the containers that would hold the needles, basically the big thing that you'd hold onto and push into. The syringes minus the needles. Inside of this gross, disgusting whatever the fuck was in there. And all the while he's saying, you need to sift through it. He's taunting me and everything, saying, sift through the disgusting bile. That's a fun word, bile. Say it with me. Bile. That's right, swamp ass. Search through the bile. Of course I did. Eventually I found it in the toilet that had whatever the fuck in it, some gross things. So I found it. Here's the key. Gave it to him. He says, all right, you're free to go. Points me down a dark tunnel and he says, but don't get lost. I went in there, I was now unbound and free. But I went into a dark, pitch-black, cavernous maze. It was short. It wasn't like they tried to pass it off as a little experience like fucking Dragged Into the Grave did at Catacombs. This was just a section of it. He says, now don't get lost. And I'm making my way through there, and I couldn't find anything. Eventually I looked like what found a passage out, pushed my way through, and there was... I came through, not pushed my way through, but I came around and turned a corner. And there was a long hallway with wires going along the ceiling and sparks at the top, with plastic sheets hanging down. Looked like the way I was supposed to go, looked like something I'd seen. And all the while, as I was making my way through the darkness, you can bet your ass I was scared. I didn't know what hid in that darkness. I didn't know what waited for me. In the end, it was just playing off of my fear of the darkness and fear of being touched and grabbed that I'd experienced thus far in the house. Worked well. I made my way through this dark hallway with electricity sparking from the ceiling. I got zapped a few times holding onto the plastic when I was moving it aside. I don't know if I was going the right way or not, because after that, I pushed a door open and came out in the back of the attraction. I could see the back of the of everything. I was wondering, I'm like, did I go the right way? I don't know if I did or not. I could see the back facade walls of the rooms I was in prior, and I heard Mama taunting new victims. I looked around and there was, wires plugged into everything. And I was thinking, well, this is a different type of haunt. They're not trying to disguise anything. You know where you are. You know what's going on. You know you're in the house of madness here, so maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm looking around and I see this door of sorts that looks different from the rest with a wood block keeping it shut. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing or not, but the only way I could, I pulled the block down, the lever block, and went through this door, and I was back inside my pitch black maze. Back where I was. When I was in the maze prior, I had seen the wall and I tried to push on it thinking it might have been the way out. But I entered through that same area and I came back around and I said, I got lost. And he says, keep looking, there's a way out in there. I didn't know if I was supposed to do that and get turned around. He was supposed to subject me to more or what. Eventually I went back to the hallway where there was electricity from the ceiling, and I says, okay, there's gotta be a way out. Instead, I tried pushing on all the other walls instead of going down there. One of the walls did move aside, because some of these houses do that. One of them moved aside and I walked down. All the while, keep in mind, I forgot to mention, I still had that second worm, Jeffrey, I think his name was this time, in my hands. Always naming things Jeffrey. So I still had it there. I didn't know what was to await me. So I got a worm in here, and I'm trying to make my way through everything. I can feel it slithering around. I make my way down a corridor and make a few turns, and I had finally escaped the house of insanity that was stripped identity. I made sure to ask the lady outside taking the tickets if I did go out the right way and I didn't just get let out wrong or the emergency exit. She told me I did it right, and that was that. Overall, I was kept in there for about a half hour to 40 minutes. Couldn't really say. Now, while this may not be some people's cup of tea and they may feel that it's an improper form of horror, I disagree. I think that this experience was something that it's completely different, and it's a dark experience that is really only reserved for those who value something different. Because this is something you'd only be subjected to if you were in a truly disturbing horror movie like The 120 Days of Sodom, or you were actually in a hostage situation with some psychos. This was something completely new and different. I was very nervous and scared leading up to it. Inside of it, there were some moments where I was sort of unnerved, anxious. This is something that the weak of heart may get truly scared by. For me, I was very nervous, very anxious, very jumpy, I was afraid, in a sense. I wasn't scared like, oh my God, my life is going to end. But I was afraid. There was a sense of fear instilled into me that no other house could. Because I didn't know what these crazy motherfuckers had next for me. So while I wasn't scared, as in, oh my God, I was afraid. There was a fear there that could have only been garnered by the experiences that you were subjected to into this house. And that's all, mostly in part, aside from the strange things you do, is in credit to the actors. Now only the best of Final Fear end up in stripped identity. And it shows. The people in there, who they were, the parts they played, were something truly terrifying and evil. They played it so believably and so well, if you did not know any better, you would think that these people were truly evil, sick, twisted individuals who wanted to make you suffer and laugh at your pain. Now, I'm sure there is a satisfaction in being the actors in Stripped Identity, and they do enjoy having that power and do enjoy scaring people and putting them through that. Of course, it's all in fun, but their acting was so fantastic and wonderful that you thought they did it for fun of their own sick enjoyment. It was something else. I dealt with, let's see, probably 5 or 6 different actors, and they knocked it out of the park. The whole house of Stripped Identity knocked it out of the park. We've been talking about Stripped Identity for a half hour now. In a normal review, this would cover about half of the houses. I would talk about the venue and 3 of the houses, give or take. Here, this is just one house. I covered Catacombs in its entirety in a half hour. Stripped Identity just took an hour to describe to all of you the harrowing, dark, and disturbingly sick journey that is Stripped Identity. It was fantastic. Well worth my time to drive out again this week and pay the $6 to experience it. I'd do it again because, as I understand, the different names you're given are different code names for the things that you're subjected to, because I know there are many things that I experienced that other people wouldn't, and things that I didn't experience other people do, such as being put on a meat hook, having water splashed all over you, having to be trapped and locked inside of a coffin, many other things. That was my experience. Everyone's experience is different, and that's cool, because it's not the same thing. I almost got sick eating that worm. That I'll always remember that. I can still feel my tummy. It's a little bit rumbly as a result of that, and the fact that I'm hungry. I'm still picking guts out of my teeth. So here's the thing. Here's the bottom line. If haunted houses really don't scare you anymore, but you still like them, if you're over 18 and are open for a very interesting and brutal experience and are okay with being led around, touched and humiliated and put through tortures of this nature, then Stripped Identity is an absolute must-do for you at Final Fear. I hope they bring it back in future seasons. It's a bit controversial, so I'm not sure if they don't or if they will. But regardless, you need to get there. You got another week or so to do it this season. Don't wait on next season, because I'm not sure if it'll return. Do it now. And if you're not old enough and it comes back next season, do it then. There is no excuse, well, aside from being way too scared and it not being your cup of tea, or you just not being old enough. But those things aside, there really isn't an excuse for you not to experience it if it interests you. It's a one-of-a-kind experience that actually scared me and upset me, and I loved every second of it. Stripped Identity was by far one of the best houses and experiences I've ever had in a haunted house. Final Fear, you guys kicked ass. I hope to see more of this and bringing it back and making it better every year in the future. You should be proud of yourselves. My name is Kenshin, and I'm peacing the fuck out. Thank you guys for watching.